Welcome to this Ohio Bar CLE presentation. Watch for 4 checkpoints to appear. To receive self-study CLE credits from the Supreme Court of Ohio, you must click on all 4 checkpoints to demonstrate that you are actively viewing this CLE program. You will not be able to proceed until you acknowledge the checkpoints. The entire program must be viewed. No partial credit will be given. See the course materials button below to download any available additional information. Thank you, and enjoy the program.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's program, Claiming Your Unclaimed Funds for Estate. My name is Chad Warwick and I'm the CLE Assistant Director for Continuing Education here at the Ohio Bar Association. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers, Kelly Lister and Susan Wagner. Susan and Kelly, please take it away.
I'm going to share my screen here. I'm Susie Wagner with Outreach Administrator for the Division of Unclaimed Funds. And I also have Kelly Lister. She is the Division Counsel for the Division of Unclaimed Funds.
Good afternoon, everyone.
We are very excited to be here today and to speak to you about claiming your unclaimed funds for estate planning attorneys. But please know this presentation is really for all of Ohio. All Ohioans can claim their unclaimed funds, and we're going to delve into it and get into all the yummy details. So today's agenda, we're really just going to go over what is unclaimed funds, how do you find out if you have any, steps to claiming them, timelines and delays, status, and of course, we have lots of resources to share with you. And Kelly's going to go over more about the law.
Hi, everyone. As Susie introduced me, I am Kelly Lister. I'm very happy to be here with you today. I'm an attorney with the Ohio Department of Commerce, and I represent the Division of Unclaimed Funds. The Ohio Unclaimed Funds law is a state law. That is true among all 50 states. There is no federal unclaimed funds law. The Ohio Unclaimed Funds Law was first enacted in 1968. It is found in Revised Code Chapter 169, and it is administered by the Ohio Department of Commerce, and more particularly, the Division of Unclaimed Funds. Cheryl Maxfield is currently our director. Ohio administrative rules are found in Chapter 1310, in Subchapter 10 for the Unclaimed Funds Division. There have been long-standing and significant efforts to create a uniform act, and those efforts have been undertaken by the Uniform Law Commission. Currently, 4 states have enacted what is referred to as the Revised Uniform Unclaimed Property Act, more commonly known under the acronym RUPA. Those states are Colorado, Illinois, Kentucky, and Maine. There are other states that have enacted versions of RUPA, Tennessee, Utah, and Vermont among them. Although, as is almost uniform among those states, there are minor variations and deviations. Fairly recently, in March of 2022, the state of Washington adopted RUPA with some minor deviations. Indiana, North Dakota, and South Carolina currently have pending RUPA legislation. Ohio does not. However, nearly all states, including Ohio, use what are referred to as NAPA forms. NAPA is a national organization, a national association rather, of unclaimed property administrators. NAPA serves as a vehicle to provide uniform form and content to holder reporting, and that allows states to exchange information and to reciprocally report to one another unclaimed funds. Our Revised Code Section 16904 for Ohio, that is our statute, which authorizes us to report unclaimed funds reported to us, to other states to which they have jurisdiction over those unclaimed funds under what is a federal common law. The federal common law dictates priority rules for unclaimed funds reporting. The first case in the trilogy of cases was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1965, a case of Texas versus New Jersey, which established primary and secondary rules for unclaimed funds reporting. Those rules, the first rule, is that unclaimed funds are properly reportable to the owner's last known address based upon the content of the holder, the person who is holding those funds in which they have no ownership interest based on their books and records. The secondary rule provides that in the event that you don't have a last known address for the owner, which is not at all uncommon, the state of incorporation of the holder has a superior claim for those accounts with unknown owner addresses or with foreign addresses, or for states in which the holder's state of does not have an unclaimed property law for that particular property type. We'll go into that in greater detail, but those are the two primary rules for reporting. They were later affirmed in a second case involving Pennsylvania versus New York by the Supreme Court, which was decided in 1972. The court affirmed that with respect to money orders, in which case oftentimes the holder does not have a state of last known address, that these two rules govern. Irrespective of whether that results in a windfall to the state of incorporation, the court continued to say that this was the proper way under the federal common law to dictate the priority of reporting. And then again, they affirmed it in 1993 in Delaware versus New York. That was a case which dealt with intermediary banks. There was an issuer of stocks, but intermediary banks and brokers were then having to report unclaimed funds, interest, dividends, and security distributions, which was the form in which these unclaimed funds were found. And again, the court found that it was the state of incorporation for those instances in which the owner of the funds could not be located, which was the proper state for reporting in that instance. So they have stood this test of time, and the only way in which the court has recognized deviation from that is in cases in which there is a statutory provision made to provide for the disposition of the funds in a manner other than these two federal common law rules. Next slide, please. So how much is in Ohio are we currently holding in unclaimed funds, and how much have we processed? Last year, we returned $109.5 million to claimants in unclaimed funds. Currently, the Department of Commerce is safeguarding approximately $4 billion in unclaimed funds. Commerce, and more particularly its director, Cheryl Maxfield, is the trustee of what is referred to as the Ohio Unclaimed Funds Trust Fund. It is created by operation of Revised Code Section 169.05. The Division of Unclaimed Funds is essentially the administrative agency responsible for ensuring holders comply with their annual reporting obligation. Please understand that holders have an annual reporting obligation irrespective of whether they've actually located unclaimed funds. They would then file, in the case that the holder does their due diligence and examines their books and records and locates no unclaimed funds, they still have a reporting obligation to file what is commonly referred to as a non-report, simply to evidence that they fulfilled their statutory responsibilities and completed a review of their records. Please understand that the funds, once they're reported to the Department of Commerce, are held in perpetuity until they're claimed by their rightful owner or by an heir or by a successor in interest. And during the time that they are in the custody of Commerce, any interest which accrues on those funds is fully recoverable by the claimant. So what are unclaimed funds? Unclaimed funds are defined by statute as any monies, rights to monies, or intangible property that is described in greater detail in section 169.02 in different categories of unclaimed funds. When, as shown by the records of the holder, the company holding the funds, that the owner has not, within the time specified, which is the period of dormancy, the period of inactivity, increased, decreased, or adjusted the amount of the funds, paid premiums or encumbered the funds, received a payment by check, draft, or otherwise with respect to those funds, corresponded with the holder regarding those funds, or otherwise indicated an interest in or knowledge of those funds, commonly evidenced by transacting business with the company holding the funds. I think it's important to qualify and explain the last two bullets there appreciate that holders in which an owner has more than one account, which is not uncommon. Think of your traditional banks, commercial banks, in which an owner may have a savings account and a checking account and an investment account. Ohio unclaimed funds law recognizes that if you have activity, if the owner engages in activity regularly with their checking account, that is sufficient for preventing the finding of dormancy with respect to all other accounts related by Social Security or otherwise that same owner has with that bank. So if I'm regularly active on my checking account, it prevents my savings account from becoming dormant. Next slide, please. So where do unclaimed funds come from? They come from a variety of different places, and that is ever changing as the way in which we do business, the way in which individuals interact with commerce with one another is changing rapidly, in the times in which we live. So where do unclaimed funds come from? Well, commonly they are the traditional checking account, the savings account, rental deposits that go unreturned because after they move from wherever they're living, they fail to provide their landlord with their updated address information. And when they send it to where they think their last known address is based on their books and records, it's returned to them. Utility deposits, uncashed checks, that's common. Undelivered stock certificates, dividends earned from stocks, insurance policies. It's not uncommon that we have life insurance policies reported to us because the decedent failed to tell anyone that they had that life insurance policy or where they had taken out a life insurance policy. Salaries, commissions, wages, and safe deposit boxes. These are all things that are categories of property regularly reported to the Department of Commerce and more particularly to the Division of Unclaimed Funds. There is an annual reporting, and realize that our records are updated throughout the course of a year. And our unclaimed funds database, which identifies all the funds that are currently on deposit with the Department of Commerce, is searchable 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the division's website. I will go in greater detail in where these unclaimed funds come from because they are dormant, inactive accounts with no owner-generated activity. That's what a commonality among all of them. And I'm going to discuss in greater detail in a couple of slides what I mean by it's a state of art, or a term of art rather, owner-generated activity. Next slide, please. So who must report unclaimed funds? Holders. Holders must report unclaimed funds. Those can be individuals or those can be businesses. Holders are any person or private enterprise, public corporation, financial institution, nonprofit organization, and all other entities that have possession, custody, or control of monies or rights to monies or other intangible property in which they have no ownership interest. Most commonly, unclaimed funds are going to be, or most commonly holders are going to be businesses that maintain account balances, write checks, or hold funds in escrow for another person or persons. A holder is further qualified by the revised code as a person who resides in the state, who is formed under the laws of this state, or is formed under the laws of the United States, but has an office or principal place of business in Ohio. Additionally, and this is kind of where an overarching kind of catch-all provision, a holder is a person or entity which has records which indicate that the person to whom they're indebted, the person to whom they're holding their funds, has a last known address in the state of Ohio. Importantly, a holder does not include any hospital granted tax exempt status under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code, or any hospital owned or operated by the state or by any political subdivision. Next slide, please. So how does property become unclaimed property entrusted to the state? Well, first, the property has no owner-generated activity for a statutorily defined period of time. No owner-generated activity for that prescribed period of dormancy. Most commonly, that period of dormancy is going to be identified in Section 169.02 of the revised code. Recognize that the period of dormancy differs based on the property type. And that's for a very logical, common sense reason. Payroll, for instance, you typically know if you pay attention to when you're going to get your paycheck. And if that property, if the owner has not engaged in any activity with regards to their salaries or wages within a 1-year period, that's the period of dormancy. We expect a payroll check to be cashed within a year. That's usually what people are using to live. And so for that reason, there's a shorter period of dormancy. However, traveler's checks, which many people may purchase with the intent not to use it or to use it over a period of years, we don't expect them to engage in activity and necessarily to negotiate those traveler's checks within a year. In fact, our law provides a 15-year period of dormancy with respect to that property type. So the period of dormancy is different based on the category of unclaimed funds that you're discussing or that you're holding. So there is a property types that have been identified by that organization that I'd referenced earlier in this slide presentation, the National Association of Unclaimed Property Administrators. They've identified different property classifications or types, and then they've provided a uniform way for states to communicate with one another and identify them, their codes. And so when Ohio gets a report from California, we're speaking apples to apples and oranges to oranges because they're using the same coding so that we know, okay, California is telling us that these are dormant checks. And we know that the dormancy period for dormant checks in California is what it is in our state and what it is in theirs. That coding helps us to communicate in a uniform language with one another. I had promised earlier I was going to give you greater definition as to what is meant in the state of Ohio by owner-generated activity. Owner-generated activity are actions initiated by the owner within the meaning of section, and I'm referencing section 169.01(b)(1), where we talk about what it is to be an unclaimed fund. It means any of the following. It means owner-initiated or authenticated transactions, account owner-initiated administrative activity, including but not limited to loan payments, ATM debit card transactions, writing checks, buying or selling securities, transferring securities, trading activity in an account, proxy voting, depositing or withdrawing funds from an account, whether by ACH, wire, check, or other method. Any written or email correspondence from the owner to the holder, any IRS form, W-9 or equivalent kind of certifications exchanged between the holder or the owner. This is a detailed definition meant to address a lot of situations because this was a common question that was brought to the division for clarification from holders. This administrative code rule provides a lot of examples in its definition and makes clear if an account owner is deceased, which is relevant to this presentation here today, most particularly, owner-generated activity does include activity by beneficiaries and estate fiduciaries or other persons who have a legal or equitable right to ownership or custody in that account. That does constitute owner-generated activity. However, owner-generated activity does not include, without limitation, any activities such as a holder crediting dividends, posting account fees, mailing account statements, or the simple non-return of mail sent by the holder to the account holder, because there are many instances in which you don't get return mail, but it is never actually delivered to the resident or who you believe was the resident at that address. Rather, it's just thrown in the trash by whoever the current resident is. Or any automatic financial or administrative transactions or activities such as automatic payments, because oftentimes it was not uncommon that we were finding that decedents would have accounts open and they would have an automatic pay. And even though they were long ago deceased, it would just continue until their account balance was zero. And at that time, there was nothing for the holder to report. So friends and family would have never realized that those monies were there and that they had been depleted for many months or perhaps even years after the owner had passed away. The last point, very important, and this is unique to Ohio. Some other states do pay interest on unclaimed funds, but that is by no means a uniform universal rule among the 50 states. However, in Ohio, it was decided by our Supreme Court that following the maximum of interest follows principle that any interest accumulating under unclaimed funds reported to the Department of Commerce are properly payable to the claimant owner. Next slide, please.
Before we jump to the next slide, we actually have a couple questions from the audience. The first one is, what is the dormancy period for savings, checkings accounts, and CDs?
Those are all found, and I can tell you, they are found in 16902, and it is a 3-year period of dormancy for checking and savings accounts.
Excellent. And then the next question is, how are unclaimed funds from retirement accounts reported and claimed?
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. How are unclaimed funds from retirement accounts reported and claimed?
Unclaimed funds from retirement accounts, if they are reported to us by the holder of those funds, and they're remitted to us with the name and address of the whatever identifying information that they have for the owner, and that there can be a lot of variance in what that is. And so for that reason, we then require that if you identify that in our unclaimed funds database, then you would submit a claim form to us. You could initiate a claim through our.
We're going to go over all of the details on claiming. Sorry, Kelly. Yeah, we're going to.
Thank you. That's true. That's true. But then, like any other property type, it would be, you would then submit a claim form. And we will go through the whole process of what you have to do in order to do that. What I will say, and kind of was going down that road, we are dependent on the records as they're reported to the identifying information that's provided to us by the holder reporting those funds. And so what we require is evidence to establish ownership of those funds may vary based on the content of the holder reporting. So there are uniform requirements for all claimants, but there is some variance, and that is dictated by virtue of the content of the holder reporting.
Other question is, do capital credits from, let's say, South Central Power end up in unclaimed funds?
Capital credits. From what holder?
Do capital credits from, an example is South Central Power, end up in unclaimed funds?
If the capital credits, and obviously if you are the owner, if you are the owner and the holder has no ownership interest in those funds, then yes, they would be reportable. And I would have to look up the period of dormancy because I'm not sure what would apply in that instance. After the prescribed period of dormancy, they would be reportable to the division for the rightful owner. I'd be interested in if the person who's asking that question could communicate, reach out to me. My contact information is at the end to give me additional detail. I'd like to look at more. I think I need to look at take a deeper dive into the particular facts of that situation. So I make sure that I'm giving them the right answer.
Is there any other questions before we continue?
No other questions. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so now that we've went over the law of unclaimed funds, what they are and why they exist and why our division is here, we're actually going to go over how you can find out if you have any and how to claim them. This process is the same no matter what it is that was reported to us. The process is the same. The only thing that's different would be the actual documentation that is required. And we're going to go through that in detail here. Our website is unclaimedfunds.ohio.gov. I encourage you to go check it out. We have lots of great information on there. We will send you from that website to missingmoney.com, which is that state authorized website. It's free and public. I think 49 of the 50 states are on missingmoney.com. So if you're even outside of Ohio, you can do a search and see if you have funds somewhere else as well. So as an overview, there's 3 easy steps to claim your funds. It's searching on missingmoney.com. Then we have a checklist of documentation. So really gathering up all of those documents that you're going to need to provide us so that we can verify you are the rightful owner of this funds. And then 3, send it to us. And we have an upload page on our website, or you can mail it to us always. And so just to go into detail a little bit, searching for your unclaimed funds. This is an excerpt from the Missing Money website. You literally type in your name. If you want your city and Ohio here for the state, do a search. It's going to pull up some results of people who have your same name. This column here, it's a little small, but on the screen, when you get there, it shows the reporting company or that holder that reported the money to us. And then what you're looking for is kind of in this middle column, the address. So you're looking for an address where you have lived or been associated with. If you find any one of these results that came up is in fact somewhere that you have lived and it matches your name, that could be a claim for you. So go ahead and click that claim button on the left-hand side. It's gold on the screen. And then follow the prompts. It will take you through a process where you will enter in your current contact information so that we can have your email and mailing address to contact you if we do need further information. You'll know that you completed step 1 of the process because it will be green and it will have a claim number right here at the top of the screen. That claim number will also be on your claim form, which will be emailed to you in about an hour or 2 after you complete this step 1 process. That claim form will show the exact dollar amount of that claim, and it will have your claim number. On the screen on Missing Money, it just shows increments. So like less than $25 or greater than $100. So once you get that claim form, you can see the exact dollar amount of your claim and make note of that claim number, because if you need to call us or have any questions, it's very helpful to have that number so we can help figure out what's going on and what we still might need for your claim.
Yeah, and I just want to interject. I know that the amount of the claim will vary because interest accrues until the date payment is issued. But it only go up from what you submit as far as the amount of the claim payment.
And so we get this question a lot. Can I look up money for a family member? Yes, we absolutely, if there's nothing else you get from this presentation, please, we encourage you to look up funds, not only for yourself, but for your family members. Most of this $4 billion belongs to people over 50 years of age, and many have already deceased. And so we're looking for heirs, executors of estates, and beneficiaries of trust to claim their money. So a lot of people, when I tell them that, they're like, oh, do I put in my name? No. You're also going to check the name of your deceased loved one. So go ahead and put in the name for your grandpa who passed away. Look up your mother, look up anyone who's deceased that you potentially could be an heir for. And many times I watch it over and over and over that people have no idea that they are an heir to some money that has been unclaimed. For example, we just had the Ohio State Fair. And last week we had someone put in their name. We have a booth at the Ohio State Fair, and they put in their name, didn't find anything, told them, they should search any of their deceased loved ones. She put in a search and found out that she had, are you ready for it? $50,000. She was an heir for an insurance policy. Okay, so that's why we're really having this conversation today, because we need those heirs to look up their loved ones and claim that money.
And I'm just Susan, I got to interject because
Yes.
what she's saying is absolutely true. In every instance, if you're an administrator or executor of an estate, you should search for unclaimed funds that have been reported in the name of the decedent. Or if you have a client in bankruptcy, if you're an attorney just searching for unclaimed funds, it's amazing. I was at the Ohio State Fair, as was Susan. How many people came up and in searching for their relatives were amazed. I would, more often than not, they were able to locate funds, if not for themselves, for a family member. It really is an easy thing that can be done, as I said, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And
I think you had told them, right, that our website lists links to missing money, which means that you're searching the databases from all the states, not just Ohio. So if you have a client that's resided in a different state, you'll be able to, or decedent, you're a administrator of an estate for a decedent that resided somewhere at another point in their life, you'll be able to locate unclaimed funds that belong to them at that address.
Yes. And even to top the $50,000 amount, last year at the Ohio State Fair, I was working when someone put in his name, found a few dollars for a claim for himself. And then when I mentioned he should look up any deceased loved ones, he put in his mother and found several dividend claims that totaled the total amount. When it was all said and done, he had a mother that had deceased and a wife that had passed away, and found a total of $71,000. So we're not talking chump change here. It can definitely be a large amount, and everybody's happy to get the money back that's rightfully theirs, but also to find unexpected money is even better. Okay. So there's a few different claim types, and we have this information on our website. And when you go through missing money, you're going to choose, you're going to match, are you an owner? Is this claim, does it just have that one person's name on it? If so, then you're the owner. If there's two people's name on the claim, it's a joint owner. And then if you're an heir, if the money is belonging to a deceased original owner and you believe you're the heir, select this as an option. Trust and business are also claim types. We have those definitions listed on our checklist of documentation page on our website. We also have this nifty little tabs. If you scroll across the tabs on our website, it will then tell you what forms you're going to need to provide to us so that we can then verify and match you to that claim, to the reported information that we got from that holder. So some forms will be provided by us and linked right here on the website. The claim form is going to be generated by you, proof of the address, personal ID, social security. Those are kind of the basic things that we're going to need for all claims. If you're an owner, if you're a single owner claimant, we just need that photo-ish ID. We're going to go over this on another page, but just at a high level, those are some of the quick things that we're going to be looking for. And then, yeah, so this is just a close-up of those tabs and kind of that checklist of documentation, which is step 2, gathering up all those, the documents that we're going to need to verify you're the rightful owner. We have lots of great information right there on our screen on the website. And so, yeah, just to go over the basics of what we're going to require, it's personal identification, unexpired driver's license, state photo ID, passport also works. Now, we have to say unexpired because we do get a lot of expired driver's license, believe it or not, sent into us as part of their claim. And we need it to be unexpired. We need that passport to be unexpired if you're going to send that. I also had a 90-year-old woman at the fair looking up her name, and she was like, I don't have a driver's license. And she said that she did have a state photo ID. So definitely that still works to claim your money. Now, when it comes to proof of address, we need something like a utility bill, bank statements, paychecks, tax forms, tax statements all work because they have that reported address on there and your name. So something that is a public record, anyone can access, and that would be inefficient. So we need proof that the reported address of the claim form is or was your former mailing address. And then I don't know, Kelly, if you wanted to add anything specific about that address information.
Yeah, so for purposes of address, we need something that was received, and it's spelled out in the administrative rule. I need to get my video here on. It's spelled out in the administrative rule. It has to be a mailing that was received at the reported address. And we're typically looking not at a letter from some person, your Uncle Stu. It has to be from a utility or a government agency that you received at that address formally. Additionally, when we're talking about the proof of the Social Security, it can't be like a tax return that you prepared and we have no evidence you ever submitted. It would be like a W-2 that you had received or a 1099 that you'd received that identifies you by name and tax identification number. That's the sort of evidence, the objective evidence that we need. This becomes more problematic because, as you know, with modern technology, there's so much information that is public information. And we're looking for information that an owner would have. An owner, that's how we identify you as the owner, that this is what is by the revised code has been considered owner identifying information. And so with respect to proof of address, we're looking at something that was received, not sent from, and we're looking for something that is coming from a government agency or a business entity. And the proof of the Social Security number likewise has to be something that you received, which identified you by name and Social Security number. And then I think that you already talked about the W-9.
Not yet.
Okay, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, so we get this question a lot, like, oh my gosh, I lived at this address 20 years ago. I don't have any utility bill or bank statement that includes that address. And so I always tell people, definitely that the tax paperwork, any kind of old pay stubs, and also credit reports, they're free. They will include all of your previous addresses. So those are all good documents to keep in mind. And then proof of that Social Security number, obviously the Social Security card, lots of folks have lost them, I've found. So yeah, it needs to be something like your W-2, a 1099. It could be a passport. Again, we'll also need that W-9 tax form completed and sent as well. We require that for all claims, and that is available on our website that you can access. Did you have something specific you wanted to add, Kelly?
Yes, if I could. The W-9, the W-9 tax form is, as a result, the requirement of the submission for every claimant to submit an IRS form W-9 is because annually the Department of Commerce must submit an annual informational reporting, a 1099 reporting to the Internal Revenue Service, identifying the interest income it has paid clients. We have no way of knowing whether that $5 in interest income that we paid you is based on the totality of your economic circumstances, going to put you over the threshold amount and make it a reportable amount. We need to have that IRS W-9 tax form because it is recognized by the IRS as the division doing its due diligence to verify the tax identification number for the claimant. In the event we're not doing our job in engaging in efforts to obtain that tax identification number, we can be subjected to civil penalties. And so if when we submit that informational reporting at the end of the year, they find that the name and the tax ID number based on the IRS records, it's not a match, we're facing the imposition of civil penalties, and we've got to be able to show them, hey, this is under signature and affirmation from the taxpayer. This is what they told us their tax identification number was. So it's a very important component, and I say that because sometimes it's a hitch for claimants who don't understand why we need this kind of form from them, but it is something that is a real sticking point for the division.
Kelly, this is you.
Okay. So we're going to talk about documentation on claiming on behalf of a deceased person. First, I want to begin by acknowledging a correction I need to make. Our first question was the dormancy period for checking, savings, and CD accounts. And I said 3, but it is in fact under 169.02A1, it is a 5-year period of dormancy. It stuck in my mind. I'm like, I got to check that. And so I did. It's 5 years period of dormancy for checking and savings accounts before they are reportable to the Division of Unclaimed Funds. And as I said, most of the dormancy periods can be located in Revised Code Section 169.02. Okay, documentation for claiming on behalf of a deceased person. A large number of unclaimed properties are annually reported to the division in the name of an estate or in the name of a person that it is later identified as deceased. It just as a matter of common sense, it makes sense that claims are going on, that funds are going unclaimed because the owner is deceased. We have developed a process for unclaimed properties, an expedited process for the recovery of unclaimed property valued at less than $3,000 that belong to a decedent. The reason for that being is that opening an estate which is normally what is required to recover funds that have been reported in the name of a deceased owner, is time consuming and can be costly. And if the value of the unclaimed funds, it becomes a balancing act where the time and expense associated with reopening the estate doesn't make sense given the value of your ultimate recovery. Our mission is to reunite these funds, these lost and forgotten funds, with their rightful owners, whether that be the named owner or their heirs or legatees. And so many states have enacted a small estate affidavit process. Unfortunately, Ohio has not yet done that. It varies from state to state. As I said, this is very much a function of state law. In those states like Arizona and Florida, where there are a high number of individuals of more advanced ages, and they have a higher amount of unclaimed funds reported to them belonging to deceased owners. They have small estate affidavits with high thresholds. In Arizona and I think their threshold is $75,000, up to $75,000 that can be recovered through the small estate affidavit process, which is an affidavit by an heir giving information identifying who the rightful owners of the unclaimed property is, and then it's paid out without the need for opening a probate estate. We've developed a specialized process in Ohio within the division for all claims less than $3,000 in which the reported owner is now deceased. Looking at the screen that you have before you, require a death certificate. It can't be redacted. It has to show the Social Security number reported for the deceased owner. In some instances, we're going to require a marriage certificate if you are the surviving spouse for the decedent. And sometimes it's a birth certificate if you're saying that you are the child of the decedent. We need something from you, and most commonly that's going to be your birth certificate, which is going to identify the decedent as your parent. And what we have created is a table of heirship, which is something that is often used in conjunction with a small estate affidavit, but it's a table of heirship that you complete in full, showing basically the family tree, the descent and distribution from the deceased property owner. There are limited instances in which a probate court order may be needed, and if that is needed, it is going to be within 2 years of filing the claim. 2 years is a defined term in unclaimed funds as under current date. Please note, as I had stated, what is required as evidentiary support for any claim to recover unclaimed funds is often dictated by the content of the underlying holder reporting. And the same is true for a deceased property owner. For all claims, $3,000 or more, and that's the totality of all the properties, not individually. You can't have 10 properties valued at $3,000. It's the cumulative total of the unclaimed property reported in the name of the deceased property owner that determines whether you meet that $3,000 threshold. For all claims $3,000 and over, we require a death certificate. Obviously, we need to evidence a certified death certificate showing that the owner is deceased. And then in those instances, we are going to require a probate court order dated within 2 years of the date of the filing of the claim. If the probate estate has been closed, you would need to file a motion to reopen the estate for a newly discovered asset and identify it as unclaimed funds and identify it by an approximation of the amount. Just to get current, then when you get your letter of authority, when you get authority from the court to act on behalf of that estate to recover the newly discovered asset, you have specific authority to recover these unclaimed funds. It makes the claims process so much easier. And then ultimately, you're going to have to provide proof of the estate tax identification number again for our 1099 reporting responsibilities. And it's informational reporting responsibilities that are done annually by the division. Also recognize, and this is true of all probate claims, I would expect if we're reopening this estate that you can then provide the Form 1.0, which would identify the heirs and legatees of the decedent. The individuals who have a property interest in these unclaimed funds are going to be the heirs and legatees, whether they inherit by statute or they inherit by the will. And so for that reason, the division uniformly requires evidence that those people have been noticed and that they in fact do exist. Next slide, please. Court authority when the owner is deceased. I mean, there's a whole list of things. I mean, it depends on the value of the estate at the time of death or shortly thereafter when the original estate was open, whether there was a release from administration or whether it was a summary administration. But we need a letter. We need something showing that you have been reappointed in the event that the estate is closed, or if it's just been opened, at the time that they died, there was no estate, and that you're opening it because, geez, they had a $25,000 life insurance policy. Then we need a letter of authority showing that you are authorized as the administrator of the estate, most likely, to administer these, to recover these funds. And there's a whole laundry list here. And as again, in bold, there is the data within 2 years to show that it's under current date. And we're happy to answer questions, as far as that, but there are big county courts like Cuyahoga and Hamilton County who regularly deal with estates being open for the primary purpose of the recovery of unclaimed funds. And they even have forms on their website. I've seen them kind of have a how-to as far as on their end with the court to go about administering the estate with the primary purpose recovering unclaimed funds. Next slide, please.
So after you've gathered up all those documents, you're on to step 3, which is just sending that information to us. There's 2 ways to do it. You can go on our website. We have a claim form and document upload page. You can kind of see an excerpt of it here on the left side of the screen. You need that claim number that I was mentioning earlier that's going to be on your claim form, and input that into the form, your name, looks like phone number, and then there's an upload link where you can attach those files and hit submit. I can tell you it does reach us a little faster if you do submit it on our website versus mailing it to us, but we will get it in the mail as well as an option. All claims are processed in the order in which they are received. And the other important thing to note is just to make sure you sign that claim form. A lot of folks forget to do that, and that delays their process, as well as the claim form does need notarized if it is over $1,000 or more for that amount. So the timeline, what we need to get started is all the documents and the claim form. Once we have that information from you, please allow 120 days for us to initially review your claim. So if, for instance, you send us something and it's missing something, the actual 120 days does not start until we get all the required pieces of documentation that we need. And we are running right at 3 months right now to review claims in this moment in time. So please consider that, keep that in the back of mind. You can always check. We do process it in order which it's received. And then on the next slide here, we have a claim status lookup. So at any point in time, if you have a question about where it's at in the process, you just go, there's a link on our claim funds page that's takes you to a screen that looks like this. You just input that claim number again, and it will tell you where your claim is in that process. So it can be show that it's received, under review, processed, needing additional evidence that your documentation has been received. If the claim's been approved and pending payment, that means we're in the process of cutting a check. And then checks are mailed out to the claimant.
And one status you may see sometimes is the status of dropped. And if you see dropped, that means that there has been an evidence request letter sent to you and we haven't received a response within 60 days thereafter. However, please understand that if it's dropped, as soon as you submit the documentation, the claim will be reinitiated and be put back in active status. However, it does restart the clock as far as that 120-day period in the event that you fail to respond to an evidence request for 60 days.
Oops. Delays in the process. So this is a sample of what the claim form looks like on the screen. Some of the things that we see, I mentioned earlier, the claim form's not signed, it's not notarized. The W-9 form has not been submitted or filled out and complete. Failure to respond to us. So all of those things that Kelly just mentioned can delay the process.
Yes, and you know, and we've mentioned current date because current date, especially with respect to estates, is a recurrent problem that there are delays because we have to go back and forth about getting up to date documentation showing current authority to recover on behalf of this state.
Now, Kelly, it's up to you to speak on the finders.
Finders are a product of statute found in 169-16. These are people who are authorized to assist in the location, delivery, recovery of unclaimed funds or the contents of a safe deposit box. They must register with the Division of Unclaimed Funds. They are not our employees. They are in no way affiliated with us. There's a statute which governs the content of those agreements found in 169-13 of the revised code. It makes clear that we're not a party to that agreement and they are not our agent. Recognize that there is a limitation on the compensation that they can receive. It is capped at 10%. That does not mean that they are to receive 10%. That is the maximum that they're allowed to receive. It is a product of personal contract, whether a claimant negotiates it for a lesser amount. Recognize that even if a finder contacts you, you're not obligated to contract with them. This is public information. The location and the recovery of these funds, it's all there on our website, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If a finder does a search and locates these funds and they contact you, it's up to you whether you decide to engage in contract with them. But ultimately, it is the claimant, the reported owner, who has to sign the claim form. Ultimately, it is the claimant that has to supply all the owner identifying information which will result in the approval and payment of their claim. So the evidentiary obligation is still on the claimant. That said, finders must submit an agreement to the division evidencing that the owner has contracted with them to assist in the recovery. And after we determine that it complies, that the agreement complies with revised code section 169.13, we issue a claim form that can be then used to process the recovery. Finders are not supposed to be initiating claims on their own. However, I have had the experience that is sometimes done. The reason that the division does not want the finder to do that is because once a claim form is initiated, it is removed from our inventory for 60 days to allow the claimant then to complete the claim form and submit it to us with the necessary supporting documentation. The division does this because we don't want 20 claims being submitted in 1 week, by 20 different heirs or 20 different owners to a property, competing for that unclaimed, then trying to figure out who gets what. So while a claim for a property is being considered, we're going to take that out of the inventory until we just make a decision on that. For that reason, if a finder finds a property, initiates a claim form without having contracted with the owner, and the owner is contacted and they said, and it's not described as unclaimed funds, it's just I've identified something that's due and owing you and I can help you. And then you think, well, maybe this is unclaimed funds, and you search our database and you don't find it. So you're like, well, I do need to use the services of this individual because I thought it would be unclaimed funds, but it's not. It's still very much may be unclaimed funds, and you should contact the division because we can locate that property in our database and it better inform you. So I just say that as a word to the wise. If you search our database because you've been contacted and you can't locate it, still contact the division and have a staff member research to see if they can identify any properties reported in the name of the owner for which you're searching. Confidential personal information, there's statutory protection provided in 169.03 of the Unclaimed Funds law that we use the Social Security number only for the purposes of assisting in the recovery of unclaimed funds. As division, the statute 169.03 says no Social Security number contained in a report made pursuant to this section shall be used by the Department of Commerce for any purpose other than to enable the division of unclaimed funds to carry out the purposes of chapter 169 of this chapter. And then they reference child support because we do a data match with child support and any unclaimed funds that are located that are reported to belong to a delinquent child support obligor. There is statutory authorization for those amounts to be recovered and paid to the Department of Job and Family Services to satisfy their delinquent child support obligation. So ultimately, the owner is recovering the benefit of those funds. It's reducing their child support debt, and it's done by operation of statute. Regularly, the division receives Ohio Public Records Law, and I am responsible for responding to those, and I can assure you that Social Security numbers, financial account numbers are redacted, and they are not shared in our productions of public records. And it's an important component for validating information for claimants, particularly for deceased property owners, because oftentimes by the time the owner passes away, they're living in an assisted living facility or a nursing home. And so the last known reported address reported by the holder is not one at which they were residing, and is not one which is reflected on their death certificate. However, when we have the ability to look at the death certificate, the certified death certificate, which shows their name and their Social Security number, we can do searches that we can validate whether that was the last known address of the decedent, and that helps us in reuniting the funds with the deceased property owner. Next slide, please.
Okay, so we are finishing up our presentation today. Again, our websites are unclaimedfunds.ohio.gov. I encourage you to go there, check it out. All of the information on the required documents is there. We also have a link when you click find funds, it takes you to missingmoney.com, which is that national website where you can search and find your money. We have lots of claim resources for you on our website. We have videos explaining exactly how to claim your funds. It walks you through it step by step. We have claim FAQ brochures, as well as claim form instructions available. All of those are posted under the claim funds section of our website. And so we want to thank you today for your time, and hopefully we helped educate you on the claim process, and you will go search your name, your family members, and any deceased loved ones. You can reach us at the phone number here, 614-466-4433, where we do have a staffed customer service team there to assist you. And if you have any questions for us directly, you can send them to claims@com.ohio.gov, and Kelly or I can respond to you there. But we'd be happy to answer any last questions if there are any.
I've got one question here that has been in the chat from several folks. Does the Division of Unclaimed Funds charge for a fee for claims processing?
Absolutely not.
Excellent. All right. Well, we are officially at time. And so this does conclude our program for today. I just want to thank our speakers for taking the time out of their busy schedule to talk with us today.
This concludes our presentation. Thank you for connecting with the Ohio Bar. Be sure to take our survey to share your thoughts about this program with us. To find more CLE programs and discover the many benefits of becoming an Ohio Bar member, now including options for unlimited CLE, visit ohiobar.org.